Introduction. Miltiades, an Athenian general whose name might not be as widely recognized as those of Themistocles or Pericles, played a decisive role in one of ancient Greece's most critical moments, the Battle of Marathon. While Miltiades often gets overlooked in the grand narrative of Greek history, his tactical brilliance at Marathon helped secure a victory over the Persian forces that changed the course of Western civilization. More than just a battle, Marathon represented the triumph of a small, democratic city-state over the vast might of the Persian Empire, an event that would shape the identity of Athens and inspire generations to come. As the dawn of the 5th century BCE unfolded, the Greek world stood on the precipice of an unprecedented threat: the rapid expansion of the Persian Empire. Under King Darius I, Persia had grown to become the largest and most powerful empire the world had ever seen, stretching from the Nile in Egypt to the Indus Valley in modern-day Pakistan. However, for Darius, this wasn't enough. His ambitions extended into mainland Greece, where the fiercely independent city-states posed a challenge to Persian domination. In his eyes, subjugating these rebellious Greeks, especially Athens, was necessary to secure Persia's western borders and to punish them for their defiance in supporting revolts against his rule. The conflict between Persia and Greece did not arise from a vacuum. It began with the Ionian Revolt, 499–493 BCE, an uprising by Greek cities in Ionia, modern-day Turkey, who were under Persian rule but still culturally tied to Greece. Athens and Eretria, moved by a sense of kinship with the Ionians, sent aid to the rebellious cities. Though the revolt ultimately failed, this act of support caught the attention of Darius, who saw it as a direct challenge to his authority. Punishment would come, swift and harsh. To Darius, the interference of Athens and Eretria was more than just a military annoyance. It was a symbolic insult. Athens, a relatively small and emerging democracy, had dared to challenge the most powerful empire on earth. Darius's response was decisive. Greece would be punished for its defiance, and the Persian Empire would extend its reach over the Greek mainland. His expeditionary force, however, would face an unexpected obstacle: the determination of the Greek city-states to defend their autonomy. For Athens, this was more than a political conflict. It was a matter of survival. Athenian democracy, still in its early stages, would almost certainly be extinguished if Persia succeeded in conquering Greece. Persian governance operated through satrapies, where governors reported directly to the king, with little tolerance for the independent, participatory political systems that had begun to flourish in Athens. The stakes were high. The fall of Athens could spell the end of Greek liberty and autonomy, leaving the city vulnerable to becoming just another outpost in the vast. But it wasn't only political differences that were at risk. The Greeks saw their culture, rooted in individual freedom and collective governance, as fundamentally opposed to the autocratic rule of the Persian great king. Greek society, particularly in Athens, celebrated the concept of Eleutheria, freedom, while Persia was seen as a land of monarchy where the king's word was absolute. The coming clash was not just about territory or political control. It was a battle of ideologies, with both sides. In 490 BCE, Darius sent a massive expeditionary force across the Aegean Sea. The target, Athens and Eretria. After quickly conquering Eretria and enslaving its population, the Persians turned their attention to Athens, landing on the plains of Marathon, a mere 40 kilometers from the city. It was here, at Marathon, that the future of Athens, and possibly all of Greece, would be decided. As the Persian forces disembarked, Athens was gripped by fear. The Athenians knew they were outnumbered by a vast, highly trained army. In a desperate bid for assistance, they dispatched Pheidippides, a professional runner, to Sparta, asking for immediate reinforcements. The Spartans, famous for their military might, agreed to help, but explained that they could not march until their religious festival ended, a delay of several days. The Athenians, alone and under immediate threat, had no choice but to prepare for battle without their allies. Enter Miltiades, a general with significant experience in dealing with Persian tactics. Miltiades knew that Athens could not afford to wait. The Persian army had to be confronted before it could march on the city itself. His bold plan: to meet the Persians head-on at Marathon. Despite being heavily outnumbered, Miltiades' leadership and understanding of the battlefield would be tested in one of the most decisive battles in ancient history, the Battle of Marathon. The outcome of this battle would not only determine the fate of Athens, but would shape the future of Greece and Western civilization. The Persian threat to Athens. In the early 5th century BCE, the independent Greek city-states faced an existential crisis. Their way of life, defined by fierce independence and the nascent democratic ideals of Athens, was threatened by the Persian Empire, a colossal force that dwarfed the political landscape of Greece. At the helm of this empire was King Darius I, who ruled over the largest dominion the world had ever seen, stretching from Egypt to the borders of India. But for Darius, the job was not done. He had his eyes set on Greece, particularly Athens, which had dared to challenge Persian authority by supporting a rebellion in Ionia. The Ionian Revolt, 499 to 493 BCE, was the spark that set these events in motion. The revolt, though ultimately a failure, had wider implications for both the Greek and Persian worlds. The cities of Ionia, located on the coast of modern-day Turkey, were Greek colonies that had fallen under Persian control. Despite their subjugation, they remained culturally tied to the independent city-states of Greece. When the Ionians rebelled against Persian rule, they called on their Greek kin for help. Athens and Eretria, moved by a sense of shared heritage, sent ships and soldiers to Ai, though this support was minor in comparison to the forces Persia could muster. It was enough to anger Darius. In his eyes, this was a direct affront to Persian authority, and Athens and Eretria had to be punished. Darius wasn't just looking for revenge. His ambitions were grander. Subduing Greece would secure Persia's western borders and send a clear message that no one, no matter how small or distant, could challenge the might of the empire. For Greece, and particularly for Athens, the Persian threat was terrifying. While the Greeks were known for their prowess in battle, the Persians were seen as an unstoppable force. The Immortals, Persia's elite infantry, were renowned for their discipline and fighting ability, and Persia's vast resources allowed it to field a military that was unparalleled in size and strength. To the Greeks, this was not just a battle for land. It was a battle for their survival as free states. Darius's plan was both calculated and aggressive. In 490 BCE, he dispatched a fleet of 600 ships carrying an army of approximately 20,000 to 25,000 soldiers. The goal was to subdue Athens and Eretria, both of which had dared to interfere in Persian affairs. First, the Persian forces targeted Eretria, a smaller city-state on the island of Euboea. After a brief siege, Eretria was betrayed from within, its defenses crumbled, and the city was sacked. The Persians enslaved its population, burned its temples, and reduced the city to ruin. The fall of Eretria sent shockwaves through the Greek world. Athens was next. News of Eretria's fate reached Athens, sparking panic among the citizens. Unlike Eretria, Athens was far larger and more powerful, but it was still no match for the vast Persian army that now loomed on the horizon. The Persian fleet landed on the plain of Marathon, a wide stretch of land just 40 kilometers from Athens, perfectly suited for their cavalry and infantry to deploy. The Athenians, knowing that their city was the next target, faced a grim reality. They would have to fight the Persians on the open field, or see their city face the same fate as Eretria. As the Persians disembarked and prepared to march on Athens, the Athenian assembly faced a critical decision. They needed help, and fast. In a desperate move, they dispatched the famed runner Phidippides to Sparta, the most formidable military state in Greece, to request reinforcements. According to legend, Phidippides ran the 240 kilometers to Sparta in 2 days, delivering his urgent plea. The Spartans agreed to help, but informed Athens that due to a religious festival, they could not march until the full moon had passed, a delay that left Athens to face the Persian threat alone, at least for the time being. Back in Athens, the situation was dire. The Persian army had landed, and the Athenian forces were heavily outnumbered. The Athenian army consisted of roughly 10,000 hoplites, citizen soldiers who were farmers, artisans, and merchants in everyday life. While the Athenians were well trained, they were no match in numbers for the Persian army, which included highly skilled archers, cavalry, and infantry. Athens, with its burgeoning democracy and cultural vibrancy, was at risk of being obliterated by a foreign force. The Athenians needed a plan, and they needed it fast. It was in this moment of crisis that Miltiades emerged as a critical figure. Miltiades had first-hand experience with the Persians, having once served as the tyrant of the Thracian Chersonese, a region under Persian influence. His understanding of Persian tactics and military organization would prove invaluable in the coming days. Unlike some of the other Athenian generals who argued for a more cautious approach or suggested waiting for Spartan reinforcements, Miltiades believed that the Persians needed to be confronted immediately, before they could fully organize, and Miltiades advocated for a bold plan: meet the Persians head-on at Marathon, taking advantage of the terrain and the discipline of the Athenian hoplites. His argument was simple: if the Athenians waited, the Persians would gain the upper hand. A quick strike was their only hope of victory. Though risky, Miltiades' plan would soon be put to the ultimate test. The decision to fight at Marathon would become one of the defining moments in Greek history. If the Athenians were victorious, they would save their city and possibly all of Greece from Persian conquest. But if they failed, Athens would likely suffer the same fate as Eretria: its people enslaved, its temples burned, and its democratic experiment extinguished. The stage was set for one of the most pivotal battles in ancient history, a battle that would determine not only the fate of Athens, but the future of Greece itself. The early life of Miltiades. Miltiades, the man who would become the savior of Athens at Marathon, was born into one of Athens' most prominent aristocratic families around 550 BCE. His early life was steeped in privilege and opportunity. His father, Cimon the Elder, had been a leading political figure in Athens, renowned for his wealth and influence. Miltiades seemed destined to follow in his father's footsteps, but his journey took many unexpected turns that would eventually prepare him for the decisive role he would play in Greek history. At the time of Miltiades' youth, Athens was still undergoing significant political transformation. The city had not yet fully embraced democracy, and power rested largely in the hands of aristocrats like Miltiades' family. Athens was marked by factional rivalries, with powerful families competing for Conti. Miltiades received a traditional Athenian education, which included physical training, rhetoric, and philosophy, skills designed to prepare young men for leadership, both in politics and on the battlefield. But Miltiades' rise to prominence did not begin in Athens. Instead, his early career unfolded far from the city, in a distant and strategically important region, the Thracian Chersonese. Located on the northern shores of the Aegean Sea, this peninsula was a critical outpost for Athens, controlling vital trade routes and providing access to the grain-rich regions of the Black Sea. In 516 BCE, Miltiades was sent to the Chersonese, where he inherited the title of tyrant from his uncle. While the modern sense of the word tyrant conjures images of oppressive rule, in ancient Greece it referred to a ruler who held power without being subject to democratic election. In the case of Miltiades, his position was largely pragmatic. The Chersonese needed strong leadership to maintain order and to protect Athenian interests, particularly against the growing threat of Persian expansion. It was here in the Chersonese that Miltiades first encountered the vast power of the Persian Empire. At the time, Persia was aggressively expanding its territories under the rule of King Darius I. The region of Thrace and the cities along the northern Aegean coast were in the direct path of Persian expansion, and Miltiades found himself caught in a delicate balancing act. He had to navigate the politics of Persian rule while maintaining his loyalty to Athens. In 513 BCE, Darius launched his Scythian campaign, an ambitious attempt to subdue the nomadic Scythians beyond the Danube River. Miltiades, as ruler of the Chersonese, was compelled to join the Persian campaign as an ally, effectively serving the empire during this period. This alliance was born out of necessity. Persia's dominance in the region was overwhelming, and Miltiades understood that outright defiance would likely lead to the destruction of the Chersonese and the loss of Athenian influence in the area. Despite his cooperation with the Persians, Miltiades never trusted them completely. His loyalty remained with Athens, and he was constantly looking for opportunities to break free from Persian control. That opportunity came with the Ionian Revolt in 499 BCE. As the Greek cities of Ionia rose up against Persian rule, Miltiades saw a chance to weaken Persian authority in the region. He threw his support behind the revolt, aligning himself with Athens and the other rebelling cities. However, the revolt ended in failure, and the Persian response was swift and brutal. Miltiades, now a marked man in the eyes of the Persian Empire, had no choice but to flee the Chersonese. If he stayed, he risked not only his own life but also the annihilation of his supporters. He made a daring escape and returned to Athens, where he would soon face another challenge, proving his loyalty to his fellow Athenians, who were suspicious of his past cooperation with Persia. Upon his return to Athens, Miltiades was met with mixed reactions. His earlier alignment with Persia during the Scythian campaign raised doubts about his true allegiances. Some Athenians viewed him as an opportunist, someone who switched sides when it suited his personal interests. However, Miltiades' deep knowledge of Persian military tactics and his first-hand experience dealing with the empire soon became invaluable assets. He warned the Athenians that the Persians would not tolerate their support of the Ionian revolt, and that an invasion was inevitable. At first, many were skeptical, but as Persian forces began to mobilize, Miltiades' warnings gained credibility. In the years leading up to the Battle of Marathon, Miltiades managed to regain the trust of the Athenian assembly. He was elected as one of the 10 strategoi, military generals, a position of great responsibility and honor. In Athens, the role of a strategos was not merely ceremonial. These generals were expected to lead the city's armies in times of war and were held accountable for their successes or failures on the battlefield. Miltiades' appointment signaled that, despite his controversial past, the Athenians recognized his strategic mind and his potential to lead them through the growing Persian threat. Miltiades' rise to power came at a crucial moment. Athens, facing an imminent invasion by the Persian Empire, needed strong leadership, and Miltiades offered exactly that. His years of experience in the Chersonese, coupled with his deep understanding of Persian military tactics, made him the right man for the job. But it wasn't just his knowledge of Persia that set him apart. It was his boldness and willingness to take risks when others hesitated. As the Persian fleet sailed towards the shores of Marathon in 490 BCE, Miltiades was already formulating a strategy that would change the course of Greek history. While some of his fellow generals advocated for caution, Miltiades argued that the Athenians needed to confront the Persians head-on before they could gain a foothold on Greek soil. His strategy was bold, some might even say reckless, but Miltiades knew that waiting for reinforcements from Sparta would be too risky. The Persians had to be stopped at Marathon, or Athens would be next. Miltiades' early life, marked by political maneuvering, exile, and leadership in the Chersonese, had prepared him for this moment. He understood both the strengths and weaknesses of the Persian military machine, and he had the confidence to lead Athens in one of its darkest hours. His controversial past was behind him. Now, all eyes were on the battlefield at Marathon. The road to Marathon. By 490 BCE, the Persian Empire, led by King Darius I, was ready to launch its first full-scale invasion of mainland Greece. This expedition was not just about punishing Athens and Eretria for their support of the Ionian Revolt. It was about extending Persian control over the entire Greek mainland. Darius's goal was to subjugate the fiercely independent Greek city-states and bring them into the vast Persian fold, turning them into client states under Persian dominion. For the Greeks, and especially for Athens, this was a direct threat to their way of life, their autonomy, and their newly emerging democracy. The Persian army, led by the generals Datis and Artaphernes, nephew of Darius, set out with a force of roughly 25,000 soldiers, including infantry, cavalry, and the famous Persian archers. Supported by a fleet of 600 ships, this massive invasion force first targeted the city of Eretria. This small but strategically important city-state on the island of Euboea had, like Athens, supported the Ionian Revolt, and Darius wanted to make an example of it. Eretria's defense was brave, but short-lived. After a few days of siege, the city's walls were breached, and the Persians sacked Eretria. The city was burned to the ground, its population enslaved and taken back to Persia as prisoners. The fall of Eretria sent shockwaves through Greece, serving as a grim warning of what could happen to any city that dared defy Persia. Athens was now next in line, and the Persian fleet sailed south, landing at Marathon, a large open plain located about 40 kilometers northeast of Athens. For the Athenians, the news of Eretria's destruction brought both fear and urgency. The citizens of Athens knew they were outnumbered by the Persian army and that their small fledgling democracy was in immediate danger. The stakes were enormous. If Athens fell, its people would face the same fate as the Eretrians, and the city's newfound democratic institutions would be wiped away, replaced by Persian rule. In desperation, the Athenian assembly decided to send their fastest runner, Pheidippides, on a grueling journey to Sparta to request reinforcements. The Spartans, renowned for their military prowess, were the obvious choice for help. If anyone could assist Athens in defeating the Persian invaders, it was the Spartans. According to legend, Pheidippides ran the 240 kilometers to Sparta in just 2 days, arriving exhausted but determined to deliver his urgent message. Athens needed immediate military support. However, despite their willingness to help, the Spartans were unable to send reinforcements right away. The timing of the request coincided with a religious festival in honor of the god Apollo, during which Spartan law forbade them from going to war. They promised to march as soon as the festival concluded, but this delay meant that Athens would have to face the Persian army alone, at least for the next few crucial days. Back in Athens, the situation was becoming more dire by the hour. The Persian forces had landed at Marathon and were preparing to march on the city. The Athenians, led by their 10 elected generals, or strategoi, knew they had to act quickly. Among these generals was Miltiades, who had already proven to be a key voice in the military debate. While some generals favored a defensive strategy, waiting within the walls of Athens for reinforcements from Sparta, Miltiades argued passionately that they could not afford to wait. He believed that the Persians needed to be confronted immediately, on the plains of Marathon, where the terrain might give the smaller Athenian force a fighting chance. Miltiades' argument was not without risk. The Athenian army numbered only about 9,000 hoplites, reinforced by a contingent of 1,000 soldiers from their ally, Plataea. Hoplites were citizen soldiers, armed with long spears, large shields, and bronze armor. They fought in a tight formation known as the phalanx, which was highly effective in close combat but slow to maneuver. In contrast, the Persian army was larger, more mobile, and included cavalry and archers, units the Greeks lacked in both numbers and experience. Despite these daunting odds, Miltiades convinced the Athenian assembly and his fellow generals that they had to fight. His reasoning was clear. If the Persians were allowed to establish a strong foothold on Greek soil, they would be able to march on Athens at their leisure. The city, its people, and its democracy would be defenseless. By attacking the Persians at Marathon, the Athenians had a chance to catch them off guard and prevent a prolonged siege of the city itself. The decision was made. The Athenian army would march out to meet the Persians at Marathon. But even as they marched, there was doubt. The Persian army was vast and well supplied, and the Athenian hoplites were going into battle with no guarantee of success. Yet the Athenians were fighting for their homes, their families, and their way of life. For them, the stakes could not have been higher. The plain of Marathon itself would play a critical role in the coming battle. A broad, flat expanse bordered by the sea on one side and low hills on the other, Marathon was the perfect location for a clash between the two armies. For the Persians, the flat terrain was ideal for their cavalry and archers, allowing them to deploy their forces with speed and flexibility. The Athenian strategy would need to take advantage of the natural landscape to offset these Persian strengths. As the Athenian army arrived at Marathon, they took up positions on the slopes of the foothills overlooking the plain. This elevated position gave them a tactical advantage, allowing them to observe Persian movements and forcing the Persian army to fight uphill, a difficult task for cavalry and infantry alike. Yet even with this advantage, the Athenians knew they were vastly outnumbered and facing one of the most powerful armies in the world. The tension between the two forces was palpable. The Persian army, confident in its superior numbers, prepared to march on the Athenian positions. The Athenian hoplites, disciplined and determined, awaited the order to charge. For both sides, this battle would be decisive. Miltiades, now in command of the Athenian army, knew that time was not on their side. The longer they waited, the more likely it was that the Persians would receive reinforcements from their ships or gain an advantage through their superior mobility. The Athenians needed to strike first, and Miltiades was ready to take that gamble. The stage was set for one of the most pivotal battles in Greek history, a battle that would determine the fate of Athens, the future of Greece, and the direction of Western civilization. For Miltiades, it was the culmination of everything he had learned during his years of exile, political maneuvering, and leadership. The next move was his, and the future of Athens depended on it. As the two armies faced each other on the plain of Marathon, Miltiades knew that brute strength alone would not be enough to defeat the vast Persian forces. The Athenians were significantly outnumbered, and Persian tactics, particularly their use of cavalry and archers, were renowned for their efficiency and lethality. In contrast, the Athenian army, composed mostly of hoplites, was slower and heavily reliant on their tight phalanx formation. The battle would require more than courage. It would DT. Miltiades had spent years observing Persian military tactics during his time in the Chersonese and the Scythian campaign. He knew that the Persian army, though formidable, had key weaknesses that could be exploited. The Persians relied heavily on their cavalry to break enemy formations and on their archers to weaken opposing forces from a distance. However, their infantry, particularly the lightly armored Persian soldiers, were not well suited for prolonged close combat against the heavily armor. Drawing on this knowledge, Miltiades devised a daring plan. He proposed weakening the center of the Athenian phalanx, where the Persian forces would naturally concentrate their attack, while strengthening the flanks with the best hoplites Athens had to offer. This would go against conventional Greek tactics, which emphasized a strong, solid center. But Miltiades understood that if the Persians could be drawn into the center, they could be surrounded and crushed by the Athenian flanks in a clashing. This strategy was risky. By intentionally weakening the Athenian center, Miltiades was betting that his flanks could outmaneuver and outfight the Persians before the center collapsed entirely. If the flanks failed to hold or envelop the enemy quickly enough, the Athenians could be overwhelmed by sheer Persian numbers. But Miltiades was confident in his men's discipline and their ability to hold the line. The battle began with a surprising move. Miltiades ordered the Athenian hoplites to charge across the plain toward the Persian lines. This was highly unusual in Greek warfare, where armies typically advanced slowly, maintaining the tight cohesion of their phalanx formations. However, Miltiades knew that speed was essential. The Athenians had to close the gap with the Persian archers as quickly as possible to minimize the damage from their arrows. By charging swiftly, the Athenians reduced the time they were exposed to the deadly Persian missile fire. Imagine the confusion among the Persian archers as they saw the Athenian army, not waiting to be peppered with arrows, but charging headlong into battle. This audacious move threw the Persians off balance. Their archers, expecting a more conventional approach, were unprepared for the rapid advance of the Greek hoplites. The Athenian soldiers, with their large round shields, called aspis, retui. As the two forces clashed, Miltiades' strategy began to unfold. The weakened center of the Athenian line initially gave way under the weight of the Persian attack. The Persians, believing they had broken the Athenian line, pushed forward aggressively. But this was precisely what Miltiades had intended. As the Persians advanced through the Athenian center, they became overextended, leaving their flanks exposed. At that moment, the stronger Athenian flanks swung inward, crushing the Persian forces. The Persian soldiers, who were used to fighting less heavily armored opponents, were ill-prepared for the brutal close combat that followed. The heavily armored hoplites, fighting in tight formation, pushed forward with their long spears and heavy shields, methodically cutting down the lightly armored Persian infantry. The double envelopment worked perfectly. The Persians, now trapped between two advancing walls of hoplites, panicked. The once disciplined and organized Persian army fell into dis. Some ran back toward their ships on the coast, while others were cut down in the chaotic retreat. Miltiades' strategy had not only succeeded, but had decisively turned the tide of the battle in Athens' favor. The Persian cavalry, which had been expected to play a crucial role, was largely neutralized. Some historians suggest that the Persian cavalry had been temporarily withdrawn from the battlefield for reasons unknown, possibly to regroup or reposition. Whatever the reason, their absence during the critical moments of the battle allowed the Athenian hoplites to maintain their formation without fear of being outflanked or trampled. The battle was over within a few hours, but its impact would resonate for centuries. The Persians, who had expected an easy victory, were decisively beaten. Their forces retreated in disarray, with thousands of Persian soldiers left dead on the field. Estimates suggest that around 6,400 Persians were killed, while the Athenians lost only 192 men, a staggering victory by any measure. But Miltiades was not done yet. Recognizing that the Persian fleet could still pose a threat to Athens, he quickly ordered his exhausted soldiers to march back to the city. The Athenian army, having just fought one of the most intense battles in their history, now had to cover the 40 kilometers back to Athens as quickly as possible. Miltiades knew that if the Persian fleet sailed around and attacked the city while it was undefended, the battle at Marathon would have been for nothing. In one of the most remarkable feats of endurance in military history, the Athenian army made it back to Athens just in time to deter the Persian fleet from attacking. Seeing the Athenian soldiers already in position to defend the city, the Persians abandoned their plans and sailed back to Persia, marking the end of their first invasion of Greece. Talk about a productive day at work. Miltiades' tactical brilliance at Marathon became the stuff of legend. His innovative use of the double envelopment maneuver and the audacious decision to charge the Persian lines would be studied by military strategists for centuries to come. The victory at Marathon was not just a triumph of arms. It was a triumph of strategy, leadership, and the indomitable will of a free people fighting for their homeland. In the immediate aftermath, Miltiades was celebrated as the hero of Athens. He had saved the city from certain destruction, and his name became synonymous with the victory at Marathon. However, while Marathon secured Miltiades' place in history as one of Athens' greatest military leaders, his story was far from over, and the fickle nature of Athenian politics would soon turn against him. The aftermath of Marathon. The victory at Marathon was a turning point not only for Athens but for the entire Greek world. The Athenians had successfully defended their city from the most powerful empire on earth, and Miltiades was hailed as a hero. For a time, it seemed that his place in history was secure. Athens, now filled with a newfound sense of pride and confidence, believed that it had proven its worth as a defender of Greek liberty. The victory was celebrated across Greece, and Marathon became a symbol of courage, endurance, and the triumph of freedom over tyranny. However, in the volatile world of Athenian politics, fame could be fleeting, and for Miltiades, the aftermath of Marathon would be far more complicated than the victory itself. Despite his triumph at Marathon, Miltiades' later years were marked by misfortune and political scandal. Like many figures in Athenian politics, Miltiades' rise to fame made him a target for rivals who resented his newfound power and influence. Moreover, Athenian democracy, though still young, was known for its harsh treatment of those who fell out of public favor, regardless of their past achievements. After Marathon, Miltiades was given command of a fleet and tasked with leading an expedition to the islands that had supported Persia during the invasion. His goal was to punish these islands and solidify Athenian dominance in the Aegean Sea. However, this campaign proved disastrous. Miltiades' attempt to seize the island of Paros ended in failure, and he was injured during the siege. The expedition, which had started with high hopes of victory, turned into a humiliating retreat. Upon his return to Athens, Miltiades faced accusations of treason. His political enemies seized the opportunity to turn public opinion against him, blaming him for the failure of the campaign. The Athenian assembly, which had once celebrated him as a hero, now put him on trial. Charged with deceiving the people and misusing public resources, Miltiades found himself on the defensive, despite his earlier victory at Marathon. In a dramatic turn of events, Miltiades was convicted. While he was spared the death penalty due to his heroic role in Marathon, he was fined an enormous sum, an amount he could not pay. Unable to recover from the wound he had suffered during the Paros expedition and facing the weight of his public disgrace, Miltiades died soon after, his final days a stark contrast to the glory he had known just a few years earlier. Though Miltiades' fall was swift and tragic, his legacy as the savior of Athens lived on. The Battle of Marathon became one of the most celebrated moments in Greek history, a symbol of the triumph of a free people against overwhelming odds. It was the first time that a Greek army had defeated the mighty Persian Empire in open battle, and it proved that the Greeks, when united, could stand against even the most powerful adversaries. In the years following Marathon, Athens rose to even greater prominence. Under the leadership of figures like Themistocles, who would later lead the Greeks to victory at the Battle of Salamis, Athens developed into the cultural and political heart of Greece. The city's democracy flourished, and its influence spread across the Mediterranean. Miltiades, despite the tarnish on his later career, remained a pivotal figure in this transformation. His victory at Marathon had given Athens the breathing room it needed to grow and defend itself against future Persian invasions. Without his decisive leadership at Marathon, it is possible that the city, and the democratic ideals it championed, might have been lost forever. Moreover, Marathon became a rallying cry for Greek unity. It inspired other city-states, showing that even the smallest of forces could stand against the might of the Persian Empire if they fought with determination and strategic brilliance. The battle was not just a military victory, it was a moral one, reinforcing the idea that liberty was worth defending. The story of Marathon endured long after Miltiades' death. In later centuries, The battle became a symbol of endurance and perseverance, particularly in the face of overwhelming adversity. The modern marathon race, inspired by the legendary run of Miltiades from Marathon to Athens to announce the Greek victory, keeps the memory of this moment alive today. For the Athenians, Marathon was more than just a battle. It was the moment when they proved to themselves and to the world that they could defend their city and their freedom. It was a source of pride and inspiration for generations to come. Every year, the Athenians would commemorate the battle with festivals, statues, and stories that celebrated their victory over Persia. As for Miltiades, his name may not be as well known today as that of Alexander the Great or Leonidas of Sparta, but his contributions to Greek history were just as critical. His tactical innovations at Marathon laid the groundwork for future military victories, and his leadership in the face of insurmountable odds helped define the spirit of Athens in its golden age. Though his life ended in disgrace, Miltiades' actions on the plains of Marathon secured his place in the annals of history as the general who saved Athens. His story, a mixture of triumph and tragedy, serves as a reminder that history is often defined not just by moments of victory, but by the complexities of human character and the unpredictable tides of fortune.
When life's challenges come my way, paused and soft, I'll be ready for that day. Very calm, echoing the voice, but still close. With strength and wisdom by my side, intense, strong, no fear to face, nowhere to hide. Intense. I subscribe to this channel, click like today. Imagine being, because content like this just lights my way. Intense and slow.